Hi.
How's lockdown been?
A mess. It's such a mess.
Yeah,
But we're surviving. We're
yeah.
surviving. So, yeah,
And how have you been with your little boy? Because you guys are the only ones he can play with. So,
that's what I'm saying. It's been a mess because it's like, it's exhausting. And obviously, as you know, I'm 8 months pregnant. So,
yeah.
it's like, I mean, the energy levels already are like so low and they just get lower and lower. And Kai is always like, mommy, let's do this, let's do that. And then I'm like, I can't. I just can't. I'm so exhausted. But
Oh
yeah,
gosh.
otherwise, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm actually just ready for this to end. Honestly, like the last few days, especially like today, I'm like, I want my life back. I want
I know.
outside back.
I also and you know what? I keep thinking to myself like, but is it realistic? Is it
Yeah.
realistic for us to work for our lives back? Is it ever going
Mm,
to be normal? I had to go to the doctors last week, and so obviously, I had my mask on and everything like that, and then afterwards we needed to go to Clicks to get some meds. And it was just such a surreal experience
yeah,
walking
I know.
around, everyone like with masks on and trying to avoid people and keep social distancing, and I'm like, is this our new normal? Like,
Yeah.
it's weird.
Now,
It's
I'm in the stage of I'm mourning what my life used to be like. I mean, wouldn't
yeah.
life is perfect, but I'm really mourning that just being able to go somewhere when I need time. And not having to be teacher 24 hours a day. So
Right.
I'm really, really missing that incredibly. I just want to let the people know who you are. So Aisha O'Reilly is a hair influencer, and her and her husband have a YouTube channel where they talk about, well, she talks about hair and they talk about their marriage. And the reason we're having this conversation is because of a video that she put up about why they're not calling Kai, their son, colored. So you're having a cute little mixed race baby in the next month or so. I'm hoping it's a girl because I want to see. She's probably going to be so pretty. If you guys see Kai, I said to her, if I had a little girl, I would want him to marry her. But
Yeah, don't list. I
I
was
wanted
like,
to know.
why?
I wanted to know, why did you guys decide to talk about this in the first place?
Okay, wow. Where do I start? Yeah, I don't even know where to start. I think it's because we do get so many, and we did get so many, especially before Kai was even conceived. Yeah, we used to get a lot of questions like, so how are you gonna raise him? Is he, some people would ask, are you going to, like, what are you gonna call him, in terms
Yeah.
of racial category? And then others would just assume that he's gonna be colored, or even when he was born and how he came out in terms of like physical looks and stuff.
Mm.
They're just like, so he's referred to as colored almost automatically by people.
Yeah.
And so that's why for me I was like, because Kev and I, as you know, we're always honest. We've always been honest about our interracial marriage.
Yes.
Our, like, race is never like a taboo topic in our marriage. I mean, obviously I came on your show and we're
Yeah.
talking about it like for hours. And so it's never been a like, ooh, like walking on eggshells kind of thing. And I think that that's something that I've at least noticed. Goodness, I'm sorry. Can you hear my dogs? Because if you can, please close the windows because they're going crazy outside. Can you hear
Yeah,
them? Are they too loud?
yeah, I can hear them, but I think we're all gonna have disturbances. My kids might just run in here at any moment.
Yeah,
Hopefully
Kai
not.
might also. I think it's fine with kids, but dogs, I'm like, oh, they're driving me crazy. Let me just actually try and close the windows. Sorry. Otherwise, I'm going to be distracted. So, basically, it was something that race in general has always been a topic that we've wanted that we're very comfortable talking about, right? And so when we started talking about, you know, our interracial marriage, how we got together, some of the weird questions people ask us. That's one of those weird questions that people ask us. What do you call your kid? You know, what box does your kid tick?
Yeah.
And so for me, it was one of those things that there were so many questions. I'm like, okay, let me just do a bit of a mini series on my YouTube channel where we actually go into some of the challenges that we face as an interracial couple raising a mixed race child, specifically in South Africa, because that's another thing that I feel that a lot of the times people, you know, I have audience members who aren't South African, for example. They're in the US, they're in the UK or whatever, so they have a certain view of interracial and biracial kids, interracial marriages, and things like that, and classifications. But I haven't really come across a lot of content that speaks to it on, you know, in the context of any other country or any other view other than, say, American. Which for me, I'm like, but the American way isn't the only way.
The world's way, yeah.
So that's why we decided to actually just talk about it and demystify the whole thing a little bit, at least from our perspective. So yeah, that's why we do that.
I want to clarify, because there are American viewers who are going to watch this. I've been asked by a few of my American friends about this because I brought it up in a conversation I had last week. There's a difference in South Africa. So we have 4 different races in South Africa, predominantly black, colored, which is mixed race from down the line of your heritage. And then we have black, white, Indian, and colored in South Africa. And now I think we're going to add mixed race as a new generation, because there's a difference, a very distinct difference between mixed race children and colored children in South Africa. And colored and mixed race is not known as black in South Africa. We were segregated that way in apartheid. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're still very much segregated in that way. Yeah. When you posted that, what I was wondering was, what kind of conversation do you think you're going to be having with Kai with regards to the difference? And I know Kev spoke a little bit about it on the video, and I loved his comment on the historical view of colored people in South Africa.
Yeah.
So what kind of conversation do you think you're going to have with him with regards to the difference between him and a colored person from a traditional colored family?
Right. Well, I think we've kind of already started that conversation, because that was also something that, you know, we touched on in one of our other videos, was, you know, the question of when is the right time to start, when are you going to start talking to Kai about race? And for me, I've always been like, we've been talking to him about race, you know. There's only so much a 3-year-old can understand, and we're not going to go into the details and nitty gritty and the bad and the negative and all of that. That's part of it, but it's not all of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of parents are always really scared about bringing up with their kids. And it's like, I don't know when is the right time. But I even said in one of the videos that I did in the series, was like, but racists don't wait, guys. Racists don't wait to impose their, you know, ideologies on their kids. They start from the get-go. They're not thinking about it like, hey, I think age 8 is appropriate for us to teach our kids to hate, you know, people of another race, another group. So for me, I'm like, they get a head start. Here we are trying to be good parents, and it's noble, obviously, because you don't want to introduce some uncomfortable topics to your children when, like, before the time kind of thing. But there are still times where it's like, what for me, I'm very passionate about. I don't want the first racial almost experience that Kai has to be on the playground. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a negative one. You know, I wanted to be at home, and I want him to know, and he knows, mommy, he calls me chocolate, you know, and he calls his dad, he's vanilla, and I'm caramel. That's how he refers to it, you know. He's still not really getting the black, white, and mixed. Like, he gets mixed, but black and white for him is still, because he still associates it with an actual color, you know. So so when it comes to actually, like, even just to answer your question a bit more directly, like, how would we approach the sort of difference between, I think it's almost as simple as that, like you said, and translates it into something that a little kid can understand.
Yeah.
That really, when someone is referred to as colored here in South Africa, in our home country, it means that they were mixed, a while ago, so maybe their great 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 granny
Yeah.
was, or their grandfather married, someone who wasn't the same color as them. And that's what that means. But for you, it means that you're not colored because mommy is chocolate or mommy is black,
Yeah.
whatever term he's going to be comfortable with. Hi.
Yeah. I told you.
Mom life. So we knew that we were going to have, some kind of like differentiation to begin with. But like you said, exactly how you explained it, that almost historical context of it, an explanation as to
Yeah.
why colored people in South Africa are referred to as colored, and that
Yeah.
difference, the terminology that he can understand, and why I don't and we don't refer to him as colored. But I think it's important that as he grows up here, because I mean we're here,
Yeah.
we understand why some people would still refer to him as colored. I would just like our kids to just be as well versed as possible, to give them that, metaphorical armor, so that if or when someone does say anything that is, derogatory or insulting or whatever
Mm.
it is, they're able to stand their ground and be like, like, yeah, I am mixed. And, what's the problem? Yeah, my mom is black. And what's the problem? Rather than sort of internalizing it and thinking, oh, maybe there's something wrong with me,
Yes.
you know? Yeah.
I want to also just make also a distinct difference. So for me, I'm colored traditionally, and my great grandfather is from England. He was Guy Willis. I think I might be related to someone, but my great grandmother was Shangani woman,
Yes.
and they only had one child who was mixed race, but he
Right.
married a black South African Shangani woman, and
Right.
they moved to a segregated colored area in Johannesburg, so they were classified as colored. And I
Right.
don't know if people are watching, if they're old enough who know about the pencil method. My family failed the pencil method, so they fit in the colored bracket.
Yeah.
But what I loved about what you guys said, specifically, like I said earlier, what Kev said was about the traditions from colored people. So, our as a race, we kind of have our own traditions. We've picked up from a lot of different kind of races, and so we do curry, but not the same way as an Indian family would do curry. We'll
Right.
do what we call it. I think it's the stomach lining. I don't know what the other name for it is. We do that as well, but our own version of it. So we've picked
Yeah.
up from all the other races in South Africa. But I find that as a colored person who went right after apartheid ended to a predominantly white school, it kind of hit me in the face. Like, okay, these people are very different than I am. I
Mm.
don't understand any of their ways and traditions and the way they talk. And for
Right.
me, I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I had a crisis at the age of 11 of
Yeah.
how do I talk? Because colored people
Mm.
are known, we are, how can I say, in the media in particularly, when they talk about colored people, we seem uneducated and violent
Mm.
and
Yes.
angry. When
Right.
the truth of the matter is that's 90% of us are not like that. So I came into an environment where I was like, okay, I have to roll my R's and I have to kind of talk softer. I'm loud by default. But what had happened was when I was 11 was my parents would come to the school and I'd be confused. Like, because when I went home, I talk like myself. But when I'd be at
Yes.
school, I'd be like, hi, how are you? You know, that was
Right.
such a challenge at the age of
Yeah.
11, you know,
Yeah.
whereas I think children who are mixed race now in the South African context have the blessing of the no apartheid, let me put it that way. So they go into the school, everybody talks the same, everybody's basically the same.
Mm.
But traditionally, he's also going to learn from both you and Kev's sides. What do you think are the most important traditions that he needs to learn growing up away from the whole race topic?
Well, it's interesting because I've been asked that question as well. Because then, people are like, okay, it's all good and well that you're saying that, he's mixed race, but then there's always going to be some kind of almost dominant culture or tradition or any, things like that. And for me, it's like, and I think this is where I think some people are a bit sort of like, we never necessarily thought of it that way. And with Kevin and I, the reason why our marriage works, with him being a white man and me being a black woman, like as individuals, it doesn't end there. We have values, and our
Yeah.
values trump everything else
Mm,
about our upbringing. It's obviously part of our upbringing. So both sets of parents on both sides raised us to respect people. Both parents raised us to have morals, to do unto others what you would wish to be done unto yourself. All of those things, that has nothing to do with like color. It has
yeah.
nothing to do with even religion as such. I mean, a lot of, and that's another thing, and even just religion, there's so many things that have that overlap with different religions that people don't even really realize until they actually get to know somebody of that other religion, and they're like, hey, actually we believe that too. It might
Mm.
be a iteration of it, but it's pretty much the same thing. So it's the same. I look at it the same way as with race as well. There are people who are also black who I don't get on with, for example. Just because we're the same race doesn't mean we have the same values.
Yes.
That the values that were instilled in me may be different from someone down the road, or
Mm.
someone who I went to school with. So there are the core sort of maybe similar experiences, like you said, the stereotypes that we are subjected to. As a black woman, before I even speak, someone has already placed me in a certain way, in a
Mm.
certain position, and they assume that I must speak like this, that I must listen to certain music, and. But when you get to know me, then it's like, oh, okay, she's not like that at all. And it's the same thing with Kev. I know that, and I'm going to be frank, obviously, in this conversation, that there are a lot of times when people, maybe speak to Kev, have a conversation with him, and they're like, wow, okay, you're not like some of the other people, the other white people that I know. And then it's well, not everybody is that, it's not copy paste, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to that kind of stuff, again, we focus more on values, and we've never had an issue where, you know, I've wanted to obviously, you know, maybe cook. Like cooking is obviously a very important thing in all traditions. I
Mm.
want to cook a Swahili meal. Ain't no thing. My husband loves Tanzanian food. He's never looking at it like, oh, what's that? He's always like, yes, okay, what's night? You know, he's so excited. He loves my culture. You know, when we go to Tanzania, I'm not one of those women who gets worried if he's going to be okay with sitting on the floor and eating with the extended family with our hands and sharing plates. You know, like that's our traditional thing. You share like a big, like, I don't know how to say it in English. In Swahili it's sifuria. It's like a big serving dish, I guess, you know. And all the food is there. You wash your hands, cool, and you each eat from the same plate, you
Yeah.
know. And I have no stresses about that. Or taking him to my dad's village where there's no running water and there's no electricity. Like my husband isn't one of those who's just like, I don't know, babe. Can we check into a hotel thing, you know? But I also knew that about him, and that's a big reason why I married him, because I knew that integrating him into my culture and introducing him to my family, I mean, the only barrier was going to be the language, and even that he tries, you know?
Mm.
So when it comes to Kai, it really is the best of both worlds. Obviously, because we are based in South Africa, he is South African. You know,
Yeah.
my child is South African. I mean, by blood, obviously, he is half Tanzanian, but in terms of the sort of cultural aspects of things and stuff like that, he's going to pick up more South Africanisms,
Mm.
living here. Be born and raised here. So we balance very, very well within our house. You know, we've never had any kind of butting heads
Yeah.
situations or anything. Yeah.
What do you think about this culture that I spoke about earlier? Because I had my cousin wants to start a YouTube channel talking about colored culture in particular because it's so diverse, but it doesn't get the kind of credit that it deserves. And it's coming out in more conversations. But
Mm.
for instance, if I watched one of these films where the traditional view on TV is a gangster who's selling drugs, that's all we ever see of colored people in South Africa, which is super sad.
Yeah.
What do you think your conversation with him then will be? Because for him it'll be like, okay, I understand that my culture is not the same as the colored culture of South Africa, but at the same time I look the same as this person. So does it mean that if I go into a certain social setting, I'm going to be deemed similar to the person on the film or whatever, simply because I look like them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, I'm all about honesty. And,
Mm.
you know, I would definitely I'll be open to that conversation to explain to him that unfortunately, you know, and it's already started, to be honest, you know, he's already picked up these subliminal messages that, you
Mm.
know, the bad guys dress in a certain way and the good guys dress in another way. So that's
Mm.
why I always have to make sure you know, I'm monitoring what he's actually being exposed to as much as possible. But obviously, he's still going to be exposed to other things. You know, he goes to
Yeah.
school, and some of those kids will say something or whatever. So I have these check-ins with him to just let him know. I mean, you know, I'll be like, you know, do you think that, I don't know, your uncle like one of my brothers, I'm like, do you think he's a bad guy? He's like, no. I'm like, cool. So why would you, think that someone else is a bad guy? And she's like, I don't know. I don't know why I would think that. Or if it's a stereotype of, the rich white man, I'll be like, is daddy a rich white man? No, he's not. He's just a regular guy who works and, doesn't own so much land. All of there's stereotypes across all of the racial groups here. And it is sad, like you said, all of us are in and almost trapped in these stereotypes, And a lot of people do believe them. So I'm going to keep that conversation open. I don't feel like I should be more open for some, topics.
Yes. Yeah.
Others. I'm very, very passionate about making sure that he knows that, even as a Black woman, if and when he's going out into the world and he's dating, which I'm like, oh my God, but, that a woman with natural hair can be beautiful and sexy and intellectual and all of that, so that he isn't bound by that. And the same thing with him, that just because he might look like somebody on TV who might not have a good personality or whatever it is, that doesn't mean that he's also a bad person.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I want to ask you about you and Kev, your upbringing, because from my experience, growing up as a colored person in a colored area, we are kind of very hesitant of mixing with other races. I was lucky in the sense where my parents made sure that me and my sister went to a mixed school very young. Well, I had to. I had remedial needs, so that was the only schools available anyway. So we were exposed to different races at a very young age. So I had best friends who were white. Chances I could have married someone who was white. That option was always available for me. But for a lot of the people I grew up with, some of them don't even know what it's like to work with a different race, much less be in a relationship with a different race. And the conversations of our, how can I say, the older generation in our families are still very hesitant to mix with white people and would have a lot of racial comments. I mean, guys, you don't understand, like, race in our country is so deeply entrenched that even in our community, they'll be like, oh, you're acting like a white person. Like, if I talk, people say to me, oh, are you bougie now? You're acting like a white person. That's literally what I get told from people. Or it's either that or I'm from Durban or Cape Town. I mean, really. So what I was trying to say is, like, so the way that you guys were raised, what kind of values do you think were important that came from both of your families that made you guys not even care about the race, or you care about it, but I mean, not to the point where it interrupted the kind of relationship that you wanted to have with one another?
For me, well, yeah, I totally agree with you. I get that all the time. It's nothing new. All news under the sun. And it is usually by people who don't know how I grew up, where I grew up. Just a very brief thing. I am Tanzanian. I've always, maintained that I'm Tanzanian, because even though the longest time I've lived in Tanzania itself is like 2 years of my life. I traveled all over the world with my family through no fault of my own. My dad had a great job, and he was a diplomat, and that meant that I was, we hopped around from country to country, especially Europe. And I went to some very, international schools. I was exposed to all races, all types of religions, like some religions when you just don't even, you're like, what's that? I've never heard of it. So I had friends just like you from all sorts, I had Black friends who weren't African, I had, Asian friends, Indian friends, so on and so forth. So I just, as with everybody, you grow up and you kind of sponge off of different people that you grow up with. And that's kind of what happened with me. That's why my accent, because people always like, I can't place you. Where exactly? And it's like, because you can't, actually, because I kind of picked up things from everywhere. thankfully, my parents were very open about that, and they were very encouraging of that as well. That, you know, me and my brothers and sisters were exposed to as many people as possible. And so when it came to the sort of like values that we looked for, at least for me, when I looked for a husband, for me, first and foremost, I needed to know that my husband respected me, right?
Yes.
Like, he respected me as an individual, not as his wife. He respected my dreams, my goals in life. He could handle me. Because you know, I know that for some people I'm a lot, you know, like I'm very upfront about things. I'm very like animated and whatever. When I love you, I love you, like, deeply. But if I feel betrayed by you, if, you know, or if something doesn't sit right with me, I don't just like not say anything. I say stuff. I react in a certain way. So my emotions are big. You know, I'm very, when I'm angry, I'm very angry. When I'm happy, I'm so happy, etc. So that was also really important to me. I didn't want to be silenced by my anger, right? So that was also really important. But at the same time, I also knew that I needed someone who can also put me in my place when I needed to be put in my place. Does that make sense? So I needed
that's important.
You know, if I'm like acting up, then I need you to also tell me, but you don't need to be disrespectful about it. You can pull me out or whatever it is. You know, Kev has got it down. And so for me, when I saw that he was able to do that, I was like, okay, you know, like, okay, I respect that. You know, he can still be a man about things, if that makes any sense. So that was really important. And then the thing that I fell in love with, like, definitely first and foremost, which I wasn't necessarily looking for, but I still, to this day, we've been together 16 years, till this day, Kev is the most humble person I have ever met in my life. And I've met a lot of people. He is so unfazed by any kind of anything, celebrity, money. It doesn't matter who you are. He will sit down and have a conversation with you. Yes. And that's something I definitely actually learned from him. I would like to think I've always been quite humble, but the truth is I had to check myself and check my privilege sometimes, because despite the fact that he's white and I'm black, I actually grew up in a more privileged upbringing than him.
Wait, can I slow you down there quickly? Because we have a lot of conversation about white privilege, right? And it comes up the last week, like I think in the US, that has been like one of the main topics about how white people don't recognize their white privilege. But then there is such a thing called black privilege. And for those of us who've had opportunities that a lot of white South Africans, for instance, have not had, also don't know how to check our own privilege, regardless of your race. There's a level of privilege we have that the other people, I mean, I live in an area where 90% of the white people I stay around are either less fortunate than I am or are middle class.
Guest. Yes. Who's waiting for me, my boy? Okay, I'll come just now, my love. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we can talk about white privilege all we want, but at the end of the day, white privilege happens by default. It's not like these people decided one day that they were going to be like, oh no, I want to be white and privileged. You know what I'm saying? They kind of born into a situation they can't control. But we create this for our own children and then don't check them on it as well. Sorry to interrupt you. I just needed to bring that up.
Well, I think that's interesting, and that's like definitely a topic for another day, because I think that's where I always have to almost school some people, not necessarily how you've explained it, but more in the sense of there are black people out there. You know, first and foremost, I'm not South African, so I didn't grow up here, so I didn't firsthand experience the black South African experience. You know, which it could vary as well. You know, so for me, it was more about the fact that I'm not South African, I'm Tanzanian, and over and above that, my dad was a diplomat, and because of that, I went to the best schools. We lived in some insane houses. Like even now, thinking about my childhood, I'm like, damn, that was quite hectic. But but in the moment, I didn't know that was actually not normal.
Yeah.
You know, the average upbringing or lifestyle. So it is a bit of a running joke between Kev and I sometimes that, I had more of a white upbringing and he had more of a black one, according to the stereotypes. That's what I mean.
Yes, yes.
But the thing is about the whole privilege thing and the white privilege part, I need to know what is this boy doing? He's doing something to the door.
Wants your attention, mommy.
I know. The only thing is, what I do want to say about white privilege, though, is that yes, as you said, you inherit it, and you almost like it's something that comes without having to explain anything, without having to prove anything. It is automatic, and I think that's where I'll be like when it comes to white privilege, because just even the fact that walking down the street with Kev or going to a restaurant with him, he is treated in a completely different way just by virtue of the fact that he's white. That's it. Never mind, like nobody knows his history, nobody knows, and it shouldn't be the case for anybody, but we should all be treated the same way. Yes. But it's not the case, and unfortunately the world, because of our history and how the world works, you've got this sort of hierarchy place, and the white man is on top. Even if the white man had a less privileged life in terms of wealth, in terms of exposure to good education and things like that, he's still considered almost of higher value. And I put all of that in quotes. He is almost considered of higher value than a black woman who is educated, who is, all of that. That's unfortunately the sort of truth of the world. And it's only to know people that you're like, oh, actually, not all white people like this, and not all black people are like this, and not all black people are like this or have that same, experience necessarily, So come in. You
Hi.
Come say hi.
You want to see the doggy?
Come say hi. No, don't bring the doggies up. Oh gosh, the dogs aren't allowed upstairs. So now
look at this funny Sammy. Hello. Okay. Let us get to the closing then. So you can give him a little bit of attention.
Yes.
So like he's having a ton of fun.
And in closing off, guys, come out. Let me just let this dog out. Go outside. Kai, do you want to go downstairs?
Yeah,
Okay, mommy is on a very important call. Okay, I'm just finishing up now. Do you want to say hi? Hi. You want to say hi? Want me to open the gate for you? Okay, let me open the gate, but you stay downstairs, okay? Scooch. Okay, go. Mom life.
Yeah, it's just how it goes, eh? So what I wanted to ask you is, you are giving birth next month.
Yes, I am. I guess you can see my belly bump now.
Yeah, no, there's a whole person in there.
The whole human. Whole human in there. Yeah.
So in context with everything we've discussed, I'm always looking at what the future is going to look like for us, and particularly with my kids, because they've been in mixed schools from a very young age. And I say to my son, when we're having dinner, I'm like, I think you'll marry a Chinese girl. I think you'll marry an Asian girl, or not an Asian girl, like a white girl with pretty curls. And they're always laughing at me because I tried to have this conversation with him early, because I actually don't care who they bring home. All I care about is that she respects you, or he respects you, and that they respect us, because that for me is a very, very, big indicator of what kind of person you're going into your future with. But
For
I'm
sure.
looking at like 30 years from now. I said to my elders, he has to be 40 something before that happens. But like, I'm looking far in the future. What do you think South Africa is going to look like as a country, a country with regards to race? Because I'm very curious with, how can I say, colored people in particular seem to be slow to move out of this idea that I am the same as everybody else. They still treat themselves as less than, in brackets, which is always a concern for me and always a conversation that I bring up with people. I get heckled quite often because I get told I look down on colored people. I don't know how I'm colored, guys. Like, but my concern always is that we have this idea that internal growth means nothing. All we need to do is have a job until we die. And at the end of the day, we don't become all of who we were meant to become, right? But now we're having more and more mixed race children in South Africa. We're mixing a little more. What do you think the country is going to look like in 30 plus years when Kai and them are grown and your little girl or boy, girl, I hope, is in her 30s? What do you think the country's going to look like, and what do you hope it's going to look like?
Ooh, MJ, those are two different things for me, hey? Okay, so I hope, actually, no, let me swap around. I think the country, when it comes to race, I think we've got a long way to go. I really do. I think the world in general has a long way to go. It's, as we can see, you know, in our American counterparts and European counterparts and things like that. I mean, the so-called, you know how they say, well, slavery ended like 200 years ago, like, guys, get over it. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean racism has ended, guys. Like, just because slavery ended and just because it's technically illegal now, technically illegal, to harm, to kill, or whatever, a Black person, it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And so, I mean, looking at that and looking at how deeply entrenched, like you mentioned earlier in our conversation, how deeply entrenched like race and stuff is pretty much with everybody. I mean, apartheid was, I mean, it was pretty much yesterday still. Yeah. You know, it's something that, you know, our generation can remember. So, you know, it's not like, oh, but it died with, you know, our grandparents or great-grandparents' generation. It's something that our generation can remember. So I think we've got a long way. I think we've got a long way, and I think for me, my hope is that we have more conversations like this. My hope is that the conversation is also extended to not just people of color, but white people too. You know, and there's openness and there's tolerance when we are discussing it. I know that, you know, I get a lot of DMs telling me, yeah, but Aisha, it's such a sensitive topic. I'm like, I know, but the task at hand is to not make it so sensitive anymore. Yeah, you know,
it's so taboo anymore. But I feel like in certain groups of people, it's just, oh no, we can't just say that, or we can't talk openly about it. But the more we think that way, the less progressive we are.
Because this stuff is still happening. It's still happening. So whether you talk about it or not, it's still happening. And I think it's better if we do talk about it so that we can actually learn things from each other. We can, you know, sort of like start to realize that actually there are some people who aren't my race who I'm like, hey, I can vibe with that person. Just despite the fact that they not have grown up like me and had the exact same experience as me, but they're also good people, and they, you know, they're also people who want to like help other people, etc. I had a great conversation with a white colleague. I think it was almost 2 years ago, and it's always stayed with me because, you know, she was a white Afrikaans woman, and I could feel that she was nervous asking certain questions. But I put her at ease because you know, I was like, just ask me. It's fine. Just come out with it. And so I'll always remember she asked me, because she's, you know, white, her children are white, her husband's white Afrikaans, everything. But she was like, but you know, she nonchalantly said that she teaches her kids that we're all the same. We're all the same, not color, but like, you know, that whole thing of, oh, we're part of the human race.
Yeah.
And for me, I've always had that statement has always kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because yes, technically we are, and it would be beautiful if our world was like that, if South Africa as a country was like that, but the truth is it's not. And by almost teaching, I just shared my opinion with her. I said, listen, I think it's great if you start there, but you also need to teach your kids that, because she's like, oh, my kids have black friends and all that. That's great. But you also need to start teaching your kids that there are gonna be times when your kids' black friends are going to have a very different experience about something. And children are still of this mindset that we're all equal. They are never going to be able to empathize. They're never going to be able to imagine or believe or validate that, you know, their black friend went through something just because they're black.
Yeah.
And how these people do that as people of, as people of color, whatever you want to call us, black, you know, Indian, colored. Like, we've all been through that, when there's someone who, even if they're well-intentioned, they're like, oh, I'm sure it wasn't because you're black. And that is like, it's like, no, but I'm not racist because I have this, and I'm sure that this person meant it in this way, kind of thing. And then it's like, you know what, I'm not going to talk to you about this anymore, because you just don't
because
get
we can tell the difference. You know, I was telling my cousin a few days ago, like the main thing that like irks me is the, oh my word, can I touch your hair? Is it real? I'm like, whoa, hold up.
Yeah.
No, we don't do that. Like,
but those opportunities that we should be open about to explain why that makes me feel uncomfortable. You know,
I can talk very openly about why it makes me feel uncomfortable, but I'm like, the fact that you asked me that question, you could have just asked me if you're curious about the texture of my hair, why it's so different. I can give you the full explanation. I had nothing to hide. But I feel like people, maybe it's from ignorance or the fact that they don't have the information, but they just come out and say things. And I mean, I went to a predominantly white school because I was remedial. And guys, school in Mayerton, when you have 3 colored people out of 1,000 kids, you are going to be heckled by them kids because they don't know any better. They grow up knowing that my helper looks like you, so I must treat you differently. But I really love the fact that you said that to her, because it makes it so difficult for those children to empathize with our entire experience. And I mean, apartheid ended like the other day, you know, and now we're telling people to get over it. But we still experience that, number one. But number two, we still have the trauma from our parents and our grandparents that have been passed down to us.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And I think, you know, that's why my hope is that people will start being more open, but not just people. That I think the race topic should be something that should be a concern for everybody. You know, I don't like the idea, and I have been, you know, like I have been privy to that, where white people are either excluded or they exclude themselves because it's something that doesn't necessarily directly affect them. And that I've always, like, if it's like likening it, it's the best 2 analogies I can think of is how men are like, oh, you know, gender-based violence, that's, I don't want to go there because, you know, the victims of it, the majority of the victims of it are women, so that's their fight. It's like, no, we need you guys on our side too. We need to have this conversation because you're the perpetrators. So we need to talk about this. So it's the same with, you know, homophobic attitudes and mentalities, you know. But it's not just gay people who should be fighting for the rights of gay people.
Ooh, what happened there? Now the conversation gets heated and then Instagram's like,
I need to wrap things up. I've got another call. But I just wanted to just say that, you know, that it's something that everybody should be coming to the party to, because we don't experience racism like from ourselves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so it's so, for lack of a better word, the people who are the perpetrators or the people who exert that kind of prejudice against us also need to be part of the conversation, whether they personally do it or not, and whether they do it intentionally or not. And that's why I think about that conversation that I had with my colleague, because she didn't even know that what she was doing or saying might not be necessarily the right way. But I appreciate it, and I told her I really appreciate and respect that you're able to come to me and ask me, why is this not necessarily like the right way of doing things from your perspective as a Black woman? And I was able to tell her honestly.
Yeah, I really hope that like this conversation helps, for instance, more white people become open to the conversation, because I had an experience, 2 months ago, that was someone who I respect highly, and does amazing things. But I recognized there was a part of our conversation that was uncomfortable when race came up. And she looked so afraid to address it. Right. So I'm okay, I understand you're busy and all that. Me confronting you with that now is probably not going to go down very well. But there has to be.
I'm coming. Sorry, my kid's calling me. Oh, what happened?
Oh.
Hey, mister.
No.
Oh, come. I'll play with you. Come on, boy.
Okay. Let me say thank you so much.
Go.
It's fine. Thank you so much for your time, Aisha. For your time, guys. Follow Aisha and check out her YouTube videos with her and Kim. I love the couple stuff. Hi, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I want to know what you guys think. I want to go through the comments. I wasn't able to go through them, and I'm struggling to go through them when I'm busy with the live. But in South Africa, I think this race topic still needs a lot of attention, and we don't give it as much attention as it needs. I saw a few comments about, being a colored person can be a battle, particularly because I am raised, those of you who don't know, I'm raised in Interracial, which is the south of Johannesburg. We get teased for the fact that Interracial might be part of a different province, but it's not. It's part of Gauteng. My family still live there. But I wanted to talk about this because it's difficult for a colored person, I think, coming from a colored community, trying to integrate into different places where there are going to be different races and different industries. And the way that we get treated quite differently sometimes. And for me, I come from a mixed school from quite young. So I don't necessarily, it doesn't bother me much. But you do notice it. It's people do it in your face without recognizing it. And I think we need to be more open with those people. Also, I think this idea that we are less than and what we get portrayed as on TV is really something that needs to be looked at. Because at the end of the day, we come from different cultures, we have different religions, we have different understandings. Colored culture is a mixture of all South African cultures. But at the end of the day, that doesn't necessarily mean that the majority of us are gangsters. It doesn't mean that the majority of us are drug dealers or selling drugs. You know what I'm saying? We might have no family or whatever, but I think in every race in South Africa, that's a current issue. So I wanted to talk about that because I feel like we run away from the fact that colored is a whole culture. It is a whole race that is rich and beautiful, and we can do so many diverse things simply because of who we are and where we come from. And we need to focus on the highlights of those things. And then also having more conversations with our children going forward about the differences of being colored and mixed race and what that means in a South African context.